Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. The situation is slowly improving for Ukrainian defenders on the ground, and they're able to execute some counterattacks already. So let's get right to it. And I'm having some technical issues, so I'm gonna try to be as fast as possible to make sure nothing goes wrong, and I'm able to upload this video. In the past couple of videos, I focused extensively on the Kharkiv area. And this time I'm gonna mostly skip it because the other parts of the front line also require attention. But just know that Ukrainians have been successful in the area. There has been reports that over 60 Russians were surrendering in a single day in that area. Right now, Russia is a little bit dumbstruck. Let's kind of assess the general situation. Right now, Russia still has some reserves. They are now trying to move these reserves around, which is indicated by the fact that some of the prisoners that were captured on the Kharkiv directions, they were actually saying that they just previously have been fighting on some other directions. So Russia is distributing the forces around the front line. But they do have some reserves left. It was something that they were preparing for the summer campaign, which I truly believe was essentially false started because of the agreement in US to send the necessary equipment to Ukraine. So they started their campaign faster than they were expecting and hoping, and now Ukrainians are able to defend these waves of attacks that are coming a little bit prematurely, and they're less prepared than they could be. And because some of the help is already coming to Ukraine, then the severity of these attacks is again less than it was expected before. We were prepared by this by Budanov and other sources from Ukrainian command stating that May, June is going to be extremely hard months for Ukrainian defenders, that we're going to see some really tough situation on the front line, but it's not going to be something that's going to be life-ending for Ukraine. Instead, we see very marginal advances by Russians. Yes, there are reports all over the front line, and I'm going to go over it, that the Russians are pushing there. But Ukrainians are defending, and it does not sound that there is some kind of a lost hope. Most notably, if the help for Ukraine would not come, and that would be a success for Russian political and military operations, where some of the Republicans, specifically MAGA Republicans, were taking hostage the Ukraine aid question in US and were helping Putin with that. So with that also, plus with the ability of Russians to expend their resources and then get those resources resupplied from their stockpiles and throwing everything that they have during this year as much as possible, they were hoping basically to achieve some kind of a breakthrough. So when come summer, they would be able to then bend the will of Ukrainians, exhaust their resource potential, and eventually I do believe that there was a plan that they really hoped that they would be able to break through around Avdiivka, that they would be able to then follow it up with a breakthrough around Marinka, and essentially go forward, maybe siege Pokrovsk, encircle and get the Donetsk area completely occupied. But that was the general plan, and we always need to see how the plan are meeting reality. Or it's like everyone is a what was the saying? Everyone is a champion until they get a fist to the face, or something like this. I believe it was Mike Tyson who said it, and I just don't remember the complete quote from my head. In any case, General Syrskyi is operating very closely with the commanders on the front line, and he is reporting that Russians are pushing quite heavily in the areas of Kupiansk. The situation there is hard. They're specifically pushing around this area over here, where I believe they're trying to flank Sinkivka defensive position. If you remember, Sinkivka in here is the main kind of hub and center. While Ukrainians are holding Sinkivka, Russians cannot really collapse this northern front line. And second area where Russians are attacking is along this front line with Kislivka, Tutabayevka, and towards Pishane and so on, which they want to kind of move forward and move along this road. But so far, this area is a little bit too open for Russians. And while they are pushing here, they are being stopped. So far, the General Syrskyi's assessment is that Ukrainians have the capabilities needed to stop Russian advances, but obviously we should always take note that potentially something awful can happen, like happened, for example, in Ocheretina. If you remember this area, the way that Ukrainians lost Ocheretina was because Russians attacked at a very unsuccessful timing for Ukrainians, where Ukrainian units were switching out, and there was just a very poor communication. So the situation just played very well into the Russian hands. So just so for you to know that something is happening. Additionally, again, Russians are trying to attack towards Terny, and they're having the same problems as they had before. They just, again, try because they try. The problems in this area is twofold. The first one is that they cannot get of Ukrainians inside of the forests, so Ukrainians are able to get some kind of artillery and additional support from the side. And secondly, there are huge fields in the area that Russians need to cross, so they are very well seen. And again, they're also a little bit flanked from the northern side, but not as much because, again, the same problem for Ukrainians, it's mostly fields. So while it is colored like green and red, mostly it's a grayish area. There has been some reports of Russians advancing towards Bilohorivka, but Bilohorivka is a big stronghold, and the guys from there are stating, yeah, they're trying to come. Bilohorivka is like a big hill, like a high ground here, and the Russians are trying to advance, but they're just getting burned out. So Bilohorivka has been a monumental defense point that have stopped many attempts of the Russians. Situation around Chasiv Yar. This is interesting. So one thing that was happening here is there was a little bit of a panic during this week where there was some videos coming in from Kalinivka where Russian forces supposedly advanced towards Kalinivka, and they were seemingly even able to get past this line over here, which is the like a channel. In this area over here, this channel goes a little bit underground into the pipes, so this there is no water border over here. But as it turned out, this was actually a plan of the Ukrainian armed forces from the get-go, and as Russians walked in and tried to move through Kalinivka, they were undercut, and there was a big ambush on the Russian forces advancing. And Russian forces since then has been pushed out back from Kalinivka, and Ukrainians have regained territory supposedly lost. Situation around Chasiv Yar is tough, but again, Russians are even yet to capture the Channel district, which was expected to be abandoned by Ukrainians over a month and a half ago. And the main defense line of Ukrainians is expected to be around the defense of this water channel that goes over here. Yeah, I know it's a little bit confused. There is a water channel, and then there is a district that is called Channel District. So the point is, the district is still not captured despite everything, and Russians are not even close to that border of the main Ukrainian defense line. The same situation in Klishivka. Russians are trying to push into Klishivka, where is a high ground. No one is controlling anything here. This is a complete gray area. As Russians try to take the positions in Klishivka, they just instantly get destroyed. But Ukrainians are also not controlling positions there as well. It's a complete gray zone. Around Ocheretina, Russians are continuing advancing towards smaller settlements in the area, which is expected. Ocheretina was supposed to be a big stronghold, but I already mentioned why it was lost. So now Ukrainian defenses are more towards the west from here. So taking smaller villages is somewhat of expected. But right now, even these smaller villages are not really being taken by Russians. They're able to advance very incrementally. And over this last week, we've seen that the reports of how much Russians are advancing has been cutting down. If before it was, oh, Russians have advanced like 100 meters, 200 meters per day, now it's already about, oh, Russians are advancing 100 meters every second day, right? So they're still advancing, but a lot less. The situation has also been a little bit difficult towards this area over here from Marinka toward Heroivka. It's been a little bit problematic, and Kurakhova is being prepared to be a defensive position in this area. And other than that, Karlivka is also right now basically a defensive positions for Ukrainians, and they are trying to defend it with the line that is being held against these water bodies. Water bodies in general, any channels, rivers, everything has been used extensively in this war and very successfully to be defensive positions. Despite that, Russians are even yet to capture this big triangle that I talked about many, many times. Additional information is that Russians are trying to push from the south side. It doesn't seem that there has been any additional strengthening of the units in the area. It feels that just the units that were stationed in the area just received an order to attack, and that's what is being reported. So right now it's being additionally reported. Robotine is a gray area zone. Right now, nothing can really take position in the area. Ukrainians are destroying everything Russian that comes in, but also Ukrainians cannot take these positions as well. Many months of Russian aviation bomb strikes has turned this whole sector into complete nothing. There is no more defensive positions. That's the situation for every major front line. In general, there's plenty of channels that go well in depth into tactical situation. What I need to understand is that I've been telling that the situation has been improving for Ukrainians. And some people assume that that means the situation went from bad to good for Ukrainians, and that we already are supposed to see Ukrainians counterattack, Ukrainians counter-pushing. What in reality happened is that this, because of this month of deliveries and Ukrainian situation on the front went from absolutely awful, it went to really bad to pretty bad, and now it's somewhere in between pretty bad and worrying, right? So in that scale, if we measure it, so it's somewhere between that area, pretty bad. It would be a good description of the situation. So Ukrainians are still moving towards being okay and towards good, but we're still not there. The help definitely is there. I am receiving more and more reports of Ukrainian localized counterattacks where they're nibbling at Russian positions, are able to retake certain positions, or are able to undermine and enter certain Russian positions, kick them out, loot it, and then fall back to their fortified positions. But we are still not in the good zone. That's the important thing to know. Where we are getting into the good zone is with Ukrainian mobilization effort. This here, for example, is a very well-known Ukrainian singer, and he posted that he went to the essentially enlistment offices to renew his data, going to the medical commissions and so on. And he was sitting there for over 8 hours because the line was so huge. So there are plenty of people that are able-bodied people that can and will get mobilized if needed. So I want to dispose of this narrative, and I want everyone in my community to drop this Russian propaganda narrative that they try to build in their information campaign, that there is no Ukrainians that want to defend Ukraine. It is just factually not true. And beyond that, as I said, Syrskyi is very closely operating. So all of the yells that, oh my God, Syrskyi is not really focusing on how to command the troops, how to make the situation better. He's only like sitting in his office and then sending the Ukrainians to die. Well, now it's being changed to something completely different. The propaganda narrative that Syrskyi is like a micromanaging specific units, where in reality he's just working closely on the hottest areas and make sure that the general staff is there to support the activities of the localized commanders. And he's able to make significant strategic improvements. We see here Robert Bravdi, which is Magyar. Magyar is a champion of the units for the Magyar's Bird, and he's working closely with Syrskyi, as you can see. What is notable is that Magyar's unit has been operating in the Kherson area before, and now parts of his units has been moved to the northern area of Kharkiv to help improve Ukrainian positions. These are the decisions that local representatives on the ground cannot make, right? Peoples that are fighting in Kharkiv, they cannot just take units from other direction and send them to reinforce the units on the ground in northern. That's why having a general there, like a head of the general staff there, is really important, because he has the authority and power to redeploy necessary resources to strengthen certain positions and improve certain positions. That is important to say, that for all of the people that are like, oh, he's just micromanaging units. And Russians are not having a good time. There are plenty of reports here, and I'm just posting a video here. You can pause the video and try to read through this. I'm going to move this for a second so you can pause this. And Russians are not really having a good time. They're reporting that they're having their units destroyed, and it's not going good. What is nice to see is that we see more and more dedication from the Western leaders, and we see some rhetoric that follows along. And I'm really hopeful to see that this will continue into action. Here we see and I'm going to try to pronounce the name correctly, Marie Agnes Strack-Zimmermann. And she has been asked a question. She's a chair of the Defense Committee of the German Bundestag. And she was asked the question, what happens if a Russian fighter jet is shot down by a Western weapons in a Russian airspace? And she answered pretty much what I would have answered, is that Russia will have one plane less. Absolute Chad, mic drop moment for her. So let's give it a little bit of an applause for Marie Agnes Strack-Zimmermann. It was really good answer, and I'm hoping more of the leaders will understand the new situation that we're in, and more leaders will follow through this. Joe Biden has been now also a little bit in the news. He's been going around right now in the celebration for the D-Day in France. And there's been some confusion with Biden stating that Ukraine will not join NATO after victory. Firstly, we need to get a little bit of a discount that this is an election year and Biden is trying to navigate his election period. It's definitely very important for him. And secondly, I think I understand what he means, that the peace for Ukraine is not necessarily tied to her joining NATO, but I think that there is also a little bit of a misunderstanding there, and I'm really hoping that this will be clarified in the coming days. I already heard there is certain clarification stating that joining NATO is not like the target for ending the war, which I do think it should be. But this is a developing story, and I'm hoping that we're going to get there. But responding to the Russian nuclear rhetoric, US has been also responding with their own rhetoric, where they demonstrated the test launch of the Minuteman missile from US, which is an intercontinental ballistic missile able to carry nuclear capability for the US. Absolute chads, love it. We need to show more power against Russia to make sure Putin understands that whatever he does is not going to work. He is not going to succeed in Ukraine. And I'm happy to see that we're showing more and more strength in response to Putin. It's not fully there, and I'm going to talk about it in my extra follow-up videos, but we're going to definitely see something else. US is proposing an interesting plan. So we know that there has been issues with allocation of 300 arrested billions from the Russian assets. And there was basically a question, how can US help? Because US doesn't really control. There is only very, very minuscule portion of those 300 arrested billions in the US. And other states have been really problematic in allowing Ukraine to be able to receive those funds. It's unfortunately the corruption that we're having inside of our European societies that we're still pondering to dictators because money. And US has proposed a very good and relatively lawful scheme. I mean, it is lawful. It's moral and lawful. So US is saying, why don't you just say that you have arrested these, and the profits that you get, the countries that were promised the profits from these assets, are gonna just pay a loan that we're gonna give to Ukraine. And essentially, US proposes that they will issue a loan for Ukraine that is gonna be paid by the Russian assets, which is, I think it's great. Any help for Ukraine is great. And if Ukraine can get additional 50 billion in military assistance, absolutely, yeah. And then finally, I think one of the best things that, like, to cover it, to finish it up today, to be in absolute top notch. So Belousov, the new Russian defense minister suddenly is actually not as a big changer as we thought it's going to be. I know, shocker, right? Remember all of those medias and all of those shit bad journalists that were reporting that Belousov is gonna come in. He's gonna absolutely revamp the situation. So now he's been about a month in his position. He came out stating that, oh, we destroyed over almost 300 Ukrainian tanks and armored fighting vehicles. We killed 35,000 Ukrainian personnel during this month. We destroyed 11 airplanes and 4 helicopters of Ukrainian armed forces. We destroyed over 730 field artillery for Ukrainians, like over thousands of drones. Two absolutely enormous numbers. And cherry on top is he says that the Russian Federation is systematically reducing the combat potential of the Ukrainian armed forces. I'll remind you that this is the 3-day special military operation where they have been defeating Ukrainian armed forces non-stop for 3 years now. Oh, sorry, just over 3 years. It's the 3rd year that they're doing it. And so this is the guy. This guy that everyone was expecting is going to come, I don't know, drain the swamp or do anything else and beat the corruption. And I said, load of shit. This is the guy that came in and say, you can make mistakes, but you cannot lie. And then he goes on to say this. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I recently made a little bit of a talk with the European Resilience Initiative Center, so I'll leave a link for that so you can check it out and maybe see this conversation that we had. I think it was fine, but you tell me. In any case, guys, I love you. Slava Ukraini, trust in the Ukrainian armed forces, and I'll see you next time. Ukraine,